Hi everyone. I'm Lee Too Deep. Thank you for always supporting and walking with me. I hope today's video helps you relax and feel truly at peace. The gentle voice of a young woman drifted through like the first light of dawn, soft and calm. Her eyes sparkled with joy, and her cheeks were rosy under the early winter chill. That day, Deep made a promise to herself. She would treat herself to a small gift, not for any particular reason. Just because she felt she deserved it. The simple, gentle girl she was also didn't forget to bring along a warm scarf, meant for someone special, James. At the small market she often visited, Deep wandered to a handcrafted leather stall. Her eyes lit up at the sight of a plain yet elegant bag. "How much is this one, sir?" she asked kindly. 30.000 dong. The vendor replied with a warm smile. Without hesitation, Deep nodded. She handed over the money, accepted her new treasure, and bowed gratefully in thanks. As she strolled past a row of clothing stalls, her steps faltered. The clothes were beautiful, indeed, but still a little too luxurious for someone who lived modestly. Saving every penny, she just smiled quietly and walked on. Suddenly, a familiar voice called from behind. "Deep." "Is that you?" She turned and saw a man wearing a mask. "Tong? Is that really you? I didn't recognize," he laughed, pulling off his mask. "I came to find a scarf for James. Just like you." "Breakfast with me?" he offered. "I'm used to eating vegetarian now." "You go ahead." She gently declined. But somehow, they still ended up sitting at a small street-side table. Steam rising from a hot bowl of noodles. Deep chuckled, half joking. "Last time, my noodles didn't have meat. Today, they do, maybe because I'm with you." After parting ways with Tom, Deep continued her little journey. She stopped at a tiny stall and picked out a simple scarf. 60.000 dong. Warm enough, pretty enough, but most importantly, full of love to give James. As dusk fell, Deep returned home and started gathering firewood for the coming winter. The wind picked up. The sky turned grey and cold. But her heart was strangely warm, because she felt she was doing something that mattered. Just then, James appeared unexpectedly, his loyal wolf Haki by his side. He didn't say much. He simply smiled and rolled up his sleeves to help her gather the firewood. They worked together among the tall trees, their breath visible in the cold air, their hands moving in sync, as leaves fell and the wind whispered through the branches. Deep found herself thinking, working together like this feels like happiness. Suddenly, James reached into his pocket and pulled out a scarf. "I got you something, a little gift. Not expensive, but from the heart." Deep's throat tightened with emotion. Her heart swelled with something warm and peaceful. "Will you stay for dinner?" she asked. James smiled and nodded. They went to the market together, picking out fish. Carrots, eggplants, bean sprouts, and then lingered by a sugarcane juice cart, eating grilled sausages by the roadside. Every step brought a shared smile. Every glance held a quiet understanding. Back home, Deep felt a little shy. Her wooden cottage, built in 1997, was old and faded. "I have 2 other houses. She explained. "But I love this one the most. Every corner holds a memory." James didn't mind. In fact, he looked around and said, "I like this place, simple, warm, just like you." Deep headed to the kitchen. James rolled up his sleeves. "I'm a 5-star chef. You know." They cooked together. Laughter mingled with the sounds of chopping. The scent of steamed rice filling the cozy space, making the whole home glow with life. Dinner was humble: braised fish, mustard green soup, boiled vegetables, and white rice. But it was enough warmth. Enough care. Enough love. Unexpectedly, James's best friend and younger brother arrived, back from a business trip. The little house filled with chatter, talk of work, of life, of youth, until the topic turned to the women who stand beside successful men. Deep went quiet. She glanced at James, her heart dipping. Could a girl like her, not accomplished, not glamorous, truly be worthy of standing beside him? As if reading her thoughts, James gently reached out and touched her hand. "Thank you." For today. For the meal. For your gentle, sincere presence. That night, Deep stepped out onto the porch, carrying a small bowl for Haki. She patted his soft fur and whispered, "Haki, thank you for coming. Let's meet again tomorrow." "Okay." Behind her, James stood quietly, eyes tender as warm lantern light in the mist. "Good night, Deep." She smiled and nodded. "You too." The day ended, not with grand gestures. No confessions. No diamond rings. Just a warm scarf. A simple meal. A hand offered in the cold, and a gentle, growing love, day by day, after many storms. James and Deep finally held hands and walked into the wedding hall together. It wasn't a lavish ceremony. Just close family and friends, held in a small garden where they had reunited after years apart. The bride wore a simple white dress, her smile radiant in the morning light. The groom, once a hardened businessman, now looked soft, warm. and couldn't take his eyes off the woman he loved. A year after their wedding, their family welcomed a little angel, Cherry, a baby girl with her mother's sparkling eyes and her father's joyful smile. They didn't choose a luxury apartment or a mansion. They chose a humble wooden house on a hillside. Sunlight poured through the windows by day, and at night, the sound of a stream and rustling pine trees surrounded them. It was quiet enough to raise a child and close enough to the city to chase their dreams. Each morning, Deep rose early to prepare a simple breakfast. Lotus seed porridge for Cherry and iced milk coffee for James. She would whisper, "Wake up, love." Your coffee's getting cold. Cherry's playing with her stuffed bunny, go hug her before she runs off. James, once the serious CEO, now knew how to tie the little bow in his daughter's hair. How to change diapers and cook porridge. Even sing lullabies. Completely off tune. But they made Cherry giggle with delight. To Cherry, Dad was a superhero. To James, Cherry was the universe. Deep was no longer the single mother carrying wounds from the past. She was now a loving wife, a skillful mother, and James's biggest cheerleader. No matter how many responsibilities he had out there, at home, she gave him the space to just be himself, quiet, at peace. And loved. On weekends, they visited the morning market together. Deep liked picking dewy vegetables. James carried Cherry on his shoulders while she pointed and shouted. "Daddy, strawberries. Mommy loves strawberries." At night, after dinner, they'd gather around a small wooden table. James would tell Cherry about his early days as a lonely young CEO. Deep would share stories of her childhood home. Of a little girl once hurt but who learned how to love again, and love the right person. Then winter came. Their home was covered in a fine mist. The fireplace crackled with warmth. James clumsily knitted a scarf for Deep, the stitches uneven. But she accepted it like the greatest treasure. Meanwhile, Cherry drew a picture of her family, a tall daddy with long arms hugging mommy, and a little curly-haired girl holding their hands tight. One evening, James quietly asked, "Do you regret choosing this simple life? I know you could have had a very different path." Deep leaned her head on his shoulder. Smiling, "If I had the chance to choose again, I'd still choose you, this house, this dinner, and those mornings when Cherry calls out, 'Daddy, go to work.'" James tightened his embrace. "Me too." They didn't need a perfect life. Just the three of them, one roof, and a love big enough to weather all winters, all trials, all past scars. Cherry grew up in that love. In her father's laughter and her mother's gentleness, until one day, she would tell this story to someone she loved. "My parents taught me the most important lesson in life. To be kind and to love wholeheartedly.